The moment Gloria Jenkins walked through those gleaming glass doors of First Atlantic Private Bank, she felt that familiar shift in the air. The way conversations paused mid-sentence, the way eyes traveled down her worn cleaning uniform, lingered on the yellow rubber gloves tucked into her pocket, and then dismissed her entirely. But what froze her in her tracks wasn't the judgment. It wasn't the whispers that floated across the marble lobby like poison. It was the sign above the teller's window that read, "Minimum balance inquiry, $50,000. And what nobody in that bank knew, not the security guard already moving toward her, not the loan officer who'd turned his back, not the billionaire in the Italian suit who'd just let out a low, mocking laugh, was that in exactly 17 minutes, Gloria Jenkins was about to make every single person in this building question everything they thought they knew about power, wealth, and the true meaning of respect. But first, she had to survive the next 17 minutes. Gloria had been invisible her entire life. Not in the fantastical, superhero kind of way she'd often wished for that. No. Her invisibility was the ordinary, crushing kind that comes with being a 53-year-old black woman who'd spent 31 years cleaning other people's homes. She'd scrubbed toilets in mansions where the owners never learned her name. She'd polished silverware worth more than her annual salary. She'd washed windows in penthouse apartments while billionaires discussed stock portfolios on the other side of the glass, never once acknowledging her existence. Invisible. That's what she was. That's what she'd always been. Until today. Today was different. Today, Gloria had received a letter. A thick, cream-colored envelope with embossed lettering that had arrived at her small apartment in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn 3 days ago. She'd almost thrown it away, assuming it was junk mail or some elaborate scam targeting desperate people. But something had made her open it, and what she'd read inside had changed everything. Now, standing in the lobby of First Atlantic Private Bank, the most exclusive financial institution on the entire Eastern Seaboard, Gloria clutched her 16-year-old son Marcus's hand and tried to remember how to breathe. "Mama," Marcus whispered, his voice tight with the same anxiety she felt. "Everyone's staring at us." "Let them stare," Gloria said, though her own heart was hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. "We have every right to be here." But even as she said the words, she felt the weight of 3 decades of being dismissed, overlooked, and undervalued, pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. The lobby of First Atlantic Private Bank was designed to intimidate. 20-foot ceilings adorned with crystal chandeliers, floors of imported Italian marble that probably cost more than Gloria's entire apartment building, leather chairs that looked like they'd been stolen from a European palace, and everywhere, were well-dressed white people who looked at Gloria and Marcus as if they'd wandered into the wrong dimension. "May I help you?" The voice came from behind them. Gloria turned to find a security guard, a young black man, she noted with a pang of complicated emotion, standing with his hand hovering near his radio. His name tag read, Jerome, and his eyes held an apology even as his professional demeanor demanded he question her presence. "We're here to check our account balance," Gloria said, lifting her chin. "I have an appointment." Jerome's eyebrows rose skeptically. "An appointment? At First Atlantic?" "That's what I said." Jerome glanced at Marcus, tall for his age, broad-shouldered, wearing the same second-hand clothes Gloria had always dressed him in, then back at Gloria's cleaning uniform. The calculation in his eyes was painfully transparent. "Ma'am, this is a private bank. The minimum account balance here is $50,000, Gloria finished. "I know. I can read the sign." "Then you understand why I need to verify." "Gloria Jenkins." A new voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Mrs. Gloria Jenkins, correct?" Gloria turned to see a young woman approaching, Asian American, impeccably dressed in a tailored gray suit, with a tablet clutched against her chest. Her name tag identified her as Maylin Chen, Private Client Services. "Yes," Gloria said, relief flooding through her. "That's me." Maylin's smile was warm, genuine, a stark contrast to the cold reception Gloria had received from everyone else. "Mrs. Jenkins, we've been expecting you." I'm so sorry for any confusion." She shot Jerome a look that made the security guard take a step back. "Please, follow me. Mr. Harrison is ready for you in the executive suite." As Maylin led Gloria and Marcus through the lobby, Gloria became acutely aware of the whispers following them like shadows. Did she say executive suite? There must be some mistake. Maybe she won the lottery or something. The comments were meant to be quiet, but Gloria heard every word. She'd spent a lifetime developing the ability to hear what people said about her when they thought she wasn't listening. It was a survival skill, honed over decades of working in homes where she was treated as furniture present, but not really there. "Don't listen to them, Mama," Marcus murmured, his hand finding hers again. "They don't know anything." Marcus. Her beautiful, brilliant son. The boy she'd raised alone after his father disappeared when Marcus was 3. The boy who'd maintained a 4 gigapascals at one of the worst-funded public schools in New York City. The boy who'd taught himself to code using borrowed library computers and had already received early acceptance letters from MIT, Stanford, and Howard University. Marcus was the reason Gloria had cleaned houses for 31 years. He was the reason she'd worked doubles and triples, sometimes sleeping only 3 hours a night. He was the reason she'd sacrificed her health, her social life, her dreams. Everything Gloria had ever done, she'd done for him. And now, finally, she was going to be able to give him the future he deserved. The executive suite was located on the top floor of the bank, accessible only by a private elevator that required a key card. Mei Lin swiped them in, and as the elevator rose, Gloria felt something shifting inside her. A quiet, trembling thing that had been dormant for so long she'd forgotten it existed. "Hope." "Mrs. Jenkins," Mei Lin said gently, "I know this must feel overwhelming. When we received the documentation from the Blackwood estate 3 days ago, I have to admit we were all quite surprised ourselves." Gloria's throat tightened. The Blackwood estate. Even now, the name felt foreign on her tongue, like a word from a language she'd never learned. "Mr. Harrison will explain everything," Mei Lin continued. "But I want you to know whatever happens in there. Whatever you decide, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." The elevator doors opened, and Gloria Jenkins walked into a world she never knew existed. The waiting room outside Mr. Harrison's office was larger than Gloria's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline, and the furniture, sleek, modern, impossibly expensive, looked like it belonged in a museum. But it wasn't the luxury that made Gloria stop in her tracks. It was the man already sitting there. He was in his 60s, silver-haired and impeccably groomed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Gloria earned in a year. He sat with the casual arrogance of someone who had never been questioned, never been doubted, never been made to feel small. And when he looked up at Gloria and Marcus, his expression shifted through a predictable series of emotions: surprise, confusion, and then unmistakably contempt. "Mei Lin," the man said, his voice carrying the honeyed poison of old money privilege, "I believe there's been some mistake. I was told my appointment was private." "Mr. Montgomery," Mei Lin replied, her professional smile never wavering, "Mrs. Jenkins has a separate appointment with Mr. Harrison. You'll both be seen shortly." Montgomery. Gloria recognized the name. Richard Montgomery III was a real estate mogul whose face had been plastered across every business magazine in the country. He'd built his empire by buying up low-income housing, evicting the residents, and converting the buildings into luxury condominiums. Gloria had cleaned the homes of at least a dozen families who'd been displaced by Montgomery's developments. And now, here he was, looking at her like she was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "I see," Montgomery said slowly. He made no effort to hide his assessment of Gloria's uniform, her worn shoes, her natural hair pulled back in a simple bun. "And what business does a cleaning lady have at First Atlantic Private Bank?" The question was meant to wound. Gloria knew this. She'd been asked variations of this question her entire life, in grocery stores, in schools, in doctors' offices, in every space where people like Montgomery believed people like Gloria didn't belong. But today Gloria felt something different rising inside her. Not anger, exactly. Not even defiance. Something closer to pity. Because Richard Montgomery III, for all his billions, for all his power, for all his certainty that he sat at the top of the world's hierarchy, had no idea who he was talking to. "I'm here," Gloria said quietly, "to check my account balance." Montgomery laughed. It wasn't a subtle laugh, not a polite chuckle or a restrained snicker. It was a full, loud, belly laugh that echoed off the expensive walls and probably could be heard in the lobby below. "Your account balance?" Montgomery wheezed, wiping his eyes. "Oh, that's rich. That's absolutely." He caught himself, turning to Malin with amusement dancing in his eyes. "Is this some kind of diversity initiative? Are you bringing in community members for bank tours?" "Mr. Montgomery," Malin began, her professional composure beginning to crack. No. "I think it's wonderful," Montgomery continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "Everyone should understand how banking works. Maybe she can take some lessons back to her neighborhood, explain compound interest to her friends." He leaned toward Gloria with a conspiratorial smile. "Though I imagine your kind has more experience with loan sharks than legitimate financial institutions." Marcus stepped forward, his young face twisted with fury. "You can't talk to my mother like..." "Marcus." Gloria's voice was calm, soft, but it carried an authority that stopped her son mid-sentence. "Sit down." "But Mama." "Sit down." Marcus obeyed, though his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Gloria turned to Montgomery. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, at his expensive watch, his tailored suit, his carefully maintained tan. She looked at the arrogance in his eyes, the absolute certainty that he was better than her simply because of the circumstances of his birth. And then Gloria Jenkins did something that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. She smiled. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, her voice carrying the same quiet dignity she'd maintained through 3 decades of disrespect. "I've cleaned houses in neighborhoods you've never even heard of. I've raised a son who will change the world while you've spent your life taking from people who have nothing. And in about 5 minutes, you're going to discover that everything you think you know about power and wealth and worth is wrong." She paused, letting the words settle. "But you're right about one thing. I am here to check my account balance. And when I do, I promise you, this entire bank is going to freeze." Before Montgomery could respond, the door to Mr. Harrison's office swung open. "Mrs. Jenkins?" The man who emerged was not what Gloria had expected. Philip Harrison was younger than she'd imagined, mid-40s, maybe with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a face that suggested he smiled often and easily. "Mrs. Jenkins, it is an absolute honor to meet you," Harrison said, crossing the room and taking Gloria's hand in both of his. "I've been looking forward to this appointment all week." Montgomery's smug expression flickered with confusion. "Philip, you know this woman?" Harrison turned to Montgomery with an expression that Gloria couldn't quite read, something between amusement and anticipation, like a man who knew a secret that was about to be revealed. "Richard, I think you should join us for this meeting. In fact," Harrison glanced at Malin, "could you bring in the rest of the executive team? I think everyone needs to witness this." Montgomery frowned. "Witness what?" "Philip, what's going on?" Harrison smiled. "The financial event of the decade, Richard. That's what's going on." The conference room was glass-walled, offering a view of the entire executive floor. Within minutes, a dozen bank officials had assembled: vice presidents, account managers, financial advisors, all wearing the same expression of barely concealed curiosity. Gloria sat at the head of the table, Marcus beside her. Montgomery had positioned himself across from them, his confusion slowly giving way to unease. "Mrs. Jenkins," Harrison began, settling into his chair, "I want to apologize again for the circumstances of this meeting. When we received the documentation from the Blackwood estate, we had to verify everything multiple times. What we discovered was unprecedented." "Wait," Montgomery interrupted. "The Blackwood estate? As in Eleanor Blackwood?" "The same." Montgomery's face went pale. Eleanor Blackwood died 3 months ago. I went to her funeral. She was worth $4.7 billion, Harrison finished. Give or take. The room went silent. Gloria felt Marcus's hand find hers under the table. She squeezed it gently, drawing strength from his presence. Mrs. Jenkins, Harrison continued, pulling up something on the room's main display screen. What I'm about to show you has been verified by our legal team, the estate's attorneys, and 3 independent forensic accountants. There is no doubt about its authenticity. He pressed a button, and on the screen appeared a number so large, so impossible, so utterly incomprehensible that for a moment Gloria forgot how to breathe.
2,847,293,481.73. $2,847,293,481.73.
That, Harrison said quietly, is your current account balance, Mrs. Jenkins. Eleanor Blackwood left you her entire fortune. Every dollar, every asset, every investment. And as of 3 days ago, when the estate officially transferred, you became one of the wealthiest women in America. The silence in the room was absolute. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Gloria stared at the number, waiting for it to change, waiting for someone to tell her this was a mistake, a joke, a cruel prank, designed to humiliate her even further. But the number remained. $2,847,293,481.73. Mama? Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. Mama? Is this real? Gloria opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Montgomery was the first to break the silence. This is impossible, he sputtered, his face cycling through shades of red and purple. Eleanor Blackwood was my client. I managed 3 of her properties. She couldn't leave everything to a cleaning lady. And yet, Harrison said, she did. But why? Montgomery demanded. Who is this woman to Eleanor Blackwood? Gloria finally found her voice. It came out steady, calm, carrying the weight of a story she'd never told anyone except Marcus. 31 years ago, she said, I was 22 years old. I just moved to New York from Savannah, Georgia, with nothing but a suitcase and a dream of becoming a nurse. I got a job cleaning houses to pay my way through community college. She paused, the memories flooding back. One of my first clients was an old woman who lived alone in a brownstone on the Upper East Side. She was difficult, demanding, harsh, never satisfied with anything I did. Most of the other cleaning ladies refused to work for her. But I needed the money, so I stayed. Gloria looked at the number on the screen, still not quite believing it was connected to her. Her name was Eleanor Blackwood, and over the next 3 decades, I cleaned her house twice a week, every week, without fail. I was there when she had her first stroke. I was the one who called the ambulance, who held her hand while we waited, who rode with her to the hospital because she had no one else. I watched her recover. I helped her learn to walk again. And somewhere along the way, something changed. She started talking to me, really talking. She told me about her husband who died young, about the children she'd never been able to have, about the loneliness that comes with being surrounded by people who only want your money. Gloria's voice softened. She told me I was the only person in her life who'd ever treated her like a human being instead of a bank account. She said I reminded her of her mother, a woman who'd worked as a maid her entire life and never complained, never gave up, never stopped believing that dignity wasn't something you wore, but something you carried inside you. I didn't know about the will. I didn't know about any of this. I thought I was just cleaning her house, being her friend, making sure she didn't die alone. Gloria finally looked up, meeting Montgomery's stunned gaze. But apparently that mattered to her. Apparently, being seen, being truly seen by another human being was worth more to Eleanor Blackwood than all the money in the world. Montgomery's face had gone from purple to white. His hands, Gloria noticed, were trembling. "This can't be legal," he said, his voice hoarse. Eleanor was clearly not in her right mind. She was elderly, vulnerable. This cleaning woman obviously manipulated her. "Mr. Montgomery," Harrison cut in, his voice sharp. Eleanor Blackwood underwent 3 separate competency evaluations in the final year of her life. All 3 confirmed she was of sound mind. Her will was witnessed by 2 retired federal judges and notarized by the New York State Attorney General's office personally. This is, perhaps, the most ironclad testament in legal history. But, furthermore, Harrison continued, his eyes cold, Eleanor Blackwood left a letter to be read in the event that anyone challenged Mrs. Jenkins's inheritance. Harrison pulled another document onto the screen. Eleanor's handwriting, shaky but clear, filled the display. "To anyone who questions my decision, I spent 93 years surrounded by people who saw my wealth as their opportunity and my loneliness as their opening. They flattered me, manipulated me, and took from me in ways both legal and not. Gloria Jenkins was different. She never asked me for anything. She never hinted at reward or recognition. She simply cared. She treated me with the same respect whether I was wearing diamonds or a hospital gown. She looked at me, not my net worth, and saw a person. If you cannot understand why I would leave everything to someone like Gloria, then you are exactly the kind of person who will never deserve it. Let her have it all. She earned it the only way that matters, by being decent in a world that rarely rewards decency." Eleanor Victoria Blackwood. The room remained frozen. Montgomery's face had become a mask of fury and disbelief. His hands gripping the edge of the conference table so tightly, his knuckles had gone white. "This is outrageous," he finally managed. "Absolutely outrageous. Do you know who I am? I am Richard Montgomery III. My family has banked here for 4 generations. I will not sit here and watch this institution hand over billions to some. Careful, Richard." Harrison's voice had dropped several degrees. "Very careful about your next words." Montgomery ignored him. He stood, pointing a trembling finger at Gloria. "She's nobody. A cleaning lady. She probably can't even spell fiduciary responsibility, let alone manage. Mama." Marcus's voice cut through Montgomery's tirade like a blade. The teenager stood slowly, his tall frame casting a shadow across the table. "May I speak?" Gloria nodded. Marcus turned to face Montgomery, and in that moment, Gloria saw something in her son's eyes that made her heart swell with pride and break with sorrow at the same time. She saw every time he'd been followed in a store, every time he'd been pulled over for matching a description, every time he'd been told explicitly or implicitly that because of the color of his skin, he would never be good enough. And she saw him choose, consciously and deliberately, to rise above it. "Mr. Montgomery," Marcus said, his voice steady, "my mother has a bachelor's degree in nursing that she completed while working full-time and raising me alone. She didn't use it because she couldn't afford the licensing exam, and the job paid less than what she made cleaning houses." Montgomery blinked. "My mother taught herself investment principles from library books because she wanted to understand why some people had everything while others had nothing. She's been tracking market trends in a notebook for 23 years. "Marcus," Gloria began. "No, Mama. He needs to hear this." Marcus took a step toward Montgomery. "My mother speaks 3 languages: English, Spanish, and the French she learned from Eleanor Blackwood during their conversations. She can quote Marcus Aurelius and Maya Angelou from memory. She has read more books than anyone I've ever met, and she made sure I read them too. My mother is not some cleaning lady. She is the most intelligent, capable, dignified person I have ever known. And the fact that you couldn't see that, the fact that nobody in your world ever bothered to look past her uniform and her skin color, is exactly why Eleanor Blackwood chose her." Marcus leaned closer to Montgomery. "Because my mother saw Eleanor when nobody else did. And Eleanor, in return, saw my mother when nobody else would." The silence that followed was deafening. Montgomery stood frozen, his mouth open, whatever response he'd prepared dying on his lips. Around the table, the bank executives sat in stunned stillness, their preconceptions visibly crumbling. Harrison cleared his throat. Mr. Montgomery, I think it would be best if you waited outside while we complete Mrs. Jenkins's account review. Montgomery, seemed to physically deflate. I was here first, my appointment. Your appointment, Harrison said quietly, can wait. As of this moment, Gloria Jenkins is the single largest account holder in First Atlantic Private Bank's history. Her business takes priority. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Montgomery looked around the room, searching for an ally, finding none. His gaze finally settled on Gloria, and in his eyes, she saw something she'd never expected. Fear, because Gloria Jenkins was no longer invisible, and Richard Montgomery III was just beginning to understand what that meant. The number still glowed on the screen. $2,847,293,481.73. But Gloria barely saw it. She was thinking about Eleanor, about the years of quiet conversation, the shared cups of tea, the small moments of human connection that, unbeknownst to her, had been worth more than she could have ever imagined. But she was also thinking about Montgomery, about the look in his eyes, about the fear that had replaced his arrogance. Because Gloria had learned something important in her 53 years of being invisible. People who look down on others almost always have something to hide. And as she sat in that conference room, surrounded by billions she'd never asked for and power she'd never sought, Gloria Jenkins began to wonder, what exactly was Richard Montgomery III so afraid of her discovering? 24 hours ago, Gloria Jenkins had been invisible. 24 hours ago, she'd been the woman people looked through, not at just another black face in a cleaning uniform, carrying mops and buckets into spaces where she'd never be welcome as a guest. 24 hours ago, Richard Montgomery III had laughed in her face. But that was yesterday. Today, Gloria Jenkins was sitting in Eleanor Blackwood's former penthouse, her penthouse now watching the sunset paint Manhattan gold through floor-to-ceiling windows that probably cost more than her old apartment building. And today, Richard Montgomery III was about to learn that the cleaning lady he'd dismissed wasn't just a billionaire. She was also the only person alive who knew exactly where Eleanor Blackwood had hidden the evidence of his greatest crime. The penthouse was overwhelming. 12,000 square feet of luxury spread across the top 3 floors of one of Manhattan's most exclusive addresses. Art worth hundreds of millions. Basquiat, Monet, a small Picasso in the powder room. Furniture that belonged in museums. Views that belonged in dreams. And everywhere, traces of Eleanor. Her reading glasses on the nightstand. Her half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen table. Her handwritten notes tucked into the margins of books throughout the sprawling library. Gloria moved through the space slowly, reverently, running her fingers along surfaces she'd dusted hundreds of times but never truly touched. This had been Eleanor's sanctuary, the place she'd retreated to when the world became too demanding. And now, it belonged to Gloria. The thought still didn't feel real. "Mama?" Marcus appeared in the doorway of the library, his face tight with concern. "Are you okay?" Gloria managed a small smile. "I'm still trying to figure out if I'm going to wake up." Marcus crossed the room and took her hands. "You're not dreaming. This is real. All of it. All of it," Gloria repeated. She looked around the library, thousands of books lining every wall, first editions and rare manuscripts that scholars would weep to access. "I used to dust these shelves, Marcus. I used to stand in this exact spot, looking at all these books, wondering what they said. Eleanor would catch me and say, 'Read them,'" Marcus finished. "I know, you told me." She always said the same thing. "Knowledge doesn't care about your bank account, Gloria. It's free to anyone with the courage to reach for it." Gloria's eyes grew wet. She was the one who convinced me to get my GED, to go to community college, to believe I could be more than what the world told me I was. And now she's given you everything. Not everything. Gloria pulled away gently, moving toward Eleanor's desk, a massive mahogany piece that dominated the corner of the library. she gave me something else too. Marcus. Something the lawyers don't know about. Something nobody knows about. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a key, small, brass, unmarked. Eleanor gave this to me 6 months before she died. She told me that, when she was gone, I should use it to open the drawer in her desk. The one that doesn't appear to have a lock. Marcus frowned. Why would a drawer not appear to have a lock? Because Eleanor was very, very good at keeping secrets. Gloria ran her fingers along the underside of the desk until she found it a barely perceptible groove that perfectly matched the key's shape. She inserted the key, turned it, and heard a soft click. A hidden panel slid open. Inside was a single item. A leather-bound journal, thick with papers and photographs. Gloria lifted it carefully, feeling the weight of it in her hands. The cover was unmarked, worn smooth by years of handling. She opened it to the first page and found Eleanor's handwriting. To Gloria, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and the inheritance has been transferred as I intended. But the money was never the most important thing I wanted to leave you. This journal contains everything: 30 years of documentation, evidence, and proof of crimes committed by some of the most powerful people in New York City. I collected it all, partly out of paranoia and partly because I knew that someday someone would need to see the truth. I never had the courage to do anything with it while I was alive. The people in these pages are dangerous, and I was too old and too tired to fight them. But you, Gloria, you have something I never had. You have nothing to lose, and that makes you more powerful than any of them. Use this wisely, use it justly, and remember, wealth is only worth what you do with it. With all my love. Eleanor. Marcus stood beside Gloria as she flipped through the journal, his face growing paler with every page. Mama, this is evidence, Gloria said quietly. 30 years of evidence. The journal was meticulous. Eleanor had documented everything with the precision of a prosecutor building a case. Bank records, wire transfers, photographs, recorded conversations transcribed in Eleanor's careful hand, shell companies traced back to their true owners, property deeds annotated with notes about illegal modifications, and names. So many names: politicians, judges, CEOs, developers. And on page after page, appearing more than any other name: Richard Montgomery III. He's everywhere, Marcus breathed. Montgomery's connected to everything. Gloria nodded slowly. The journal painted a devastating picture. For decades, Montgomery had been the center of a web of corruption that stretched across New York City's power structure. Bribery, fraud, tax evasion, and worst of all, the systematic displacement of low-income families from their homes through illegal means. But one section of the journal made Gloria's blood run cold. The Riverview Incident, she read aloud. February 14th, 2009. Marcus moved closer. What is that? Gloria's voice was barely a whisper as she read Eleanor's notes. Richard Montgomery purchased the Riverview apartment complex in the Bronx in 2008. The building was home to 127 families, mostly Black and Hispanic, who had lived there for generations. Montgomery wanted to convert it to luxury condominiums, but the tenants refused to leave. In February 2009, a fire broke out in the building's basement. The official investigation ruled it accidental, a faulty electrical panel. But I have evidence that suggests otherwise. 3 people died in that fire. Maria Santos, 67, James Washington, 43, and his daughter, Deandra Washington, 9 years old. I believe Richard Montgomery ordered that fire. I believe he murdered those people to empty his building. And I believe I have the proof to convict him if anyone is brave enough to use it. Gloria's hands were shaking as she turned to the next page and found photographs. Building inspection reports with altered dates, fire department records with suspicious gaps, and a photograph of a wire transfer $500,000 paid to an account in the Cayman Islands 2 days before the fire. He killed them, Gloria said, her voice cracking. He killed a little girl to make a profit. Marcus's jaw was tight. Mama, we have to do something. We have to take this to the police." "The police?" Gloria looked at her son with an exhaustion that went bone deep. "Baby, half the people in this journal are police. Judges. District attorneys. Montgomery has been buying protection for 30 years. Then what do we do?" Gloria closed the journal and held it against her chest. She thought about Eleanor, about the lonely old woman who had spent decades gathering this evidence, too afraid to use it, too principled to destroy it. She thought about Maria Santos and James Washington and 9-year-old Deandra, whose deaths had been written off as an accident and forgotten by everyone who mattered. And she thought about the look on Richard Montgomery's face yesterday, when he'd realized that the cleaning lady he'd mocked was now worth more than he'd ever be. "We do what Eleanor couldn't," Gloria finally said. "We make sure these people face justice." "How?" Gloria looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline, at the glittering towers of wealth and power that had been built, in part, on the backs of people like her, by becoming too powerful to silence. The next morning, Gloria walked into First Atlantic Private Bank, wearing a navy blue Chanel suit that Maylin had helped her select the previous evening. Her natural hair was styled in elegant locks that framed her face, and her posture carried a new authority, not arrogance, but the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needed anyone else's permission to exist. The reaction was immediate. The same people who had dismissed her 2 days ago now scrambled to attention. Doors opened before she reached them. Chairs were offered before she could ask. Everyone from the security guards to the tellers to the loan officers suddenly remembered her name. "Mrs. Jenkins, how wonderful to see you again. Mrs. Jenkins, can I get you anything? Coffee, water, champagne? Mrs. Jenkins, please, right this way. Mr. Harrison is expecting you." Gloria accepted the attention with grace, but she noticed something that troubled her. The same people who had treated her like garbage when she'd worn a cleaning uniform were now fawning over her because she wore a designer suit. The change wasn't in her, it was in them. And that, Gloria realized, revealed something important about how power worked in this world. People didn't respect you. They respected what they thought you could do to them. It was a depressing realization. But it was also useful. Harrison was waiting in the executive suite, and this time, there were no other appointments. The room had been cleared for Gloria's exclusive use, and several new faces sat around the conference table, lawyers, financial advisors, and a woman Harrison introduced as the bank's chief security officer. "Mrs. Jenkins," Harrison began, "we've been reviewing your inheritance in detail, and there are several matters that require your immediate attention." "I'm sure there are," Gloria said, settling into her chair. "But before we begin, I have a question for you, Mr. Harrison." "Of course. Richard Montgomery III. He's a major client of this bank, isn't he?" Harrison's expression flickered just for a moment, but Gloria caught it. "Mr. Montgomery has banked with First Atlantic for many years, yes. And would it be accurate to say that his business dealings are complicated?" The temperature in the room dropped by several degrees. The lawyers exchanged glances. The chief security officer leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Mrs. Jenkins," Harrison said carefully, "is there something specific you'd like to discuss?" Gloria reached into the briefcase Maylin had provided and pulled out a folder copies she'd made of specific pages from Eleanor's journal. She slid them across the table. "I believe Richard Montgomery is a murderer," Gloria said calmly. "I believe he ordered the arson that killed 3 people in the Bronx in 2009. And I believe First Atlantic Private Bank has been laundering money for him for 30 years. The silence was absolute. Harrison picked up the folder with trembling hands. As he flipped through the documents, his face went from confused to shocked to terrified. "Where did you get this?" "Eleanor Blackwood gave it to me, along with 30 years of additional documentation proving that the most powerful people in this city have been committing crimes with impunity while pretending to be pillars of the community." "Mrs. Jenkins," the chief security officer began. "I'm not finished," Gloria cut in. "I know how these things usually work. Someone like me brings evidence against someone like Montgomery, and suddenly that evidence disappears. Witnesses develop amnesia. Accidents happen." She leaned forward, meeting Harrison's eyes. "But here's what's different about this situation. I'm now worth almost $3 billion. I own more of this bank's assets than any other individual client. And I have made arrangements to ensure that if anything happens to me or to my son, every piece of evidence in Eleanor's journal will be automatically released to every media outlet, law enforcement agency, and regulatory body in the country. She let that sink in. So, let me be very clear about what happens next. You are going to conduct an internal investigation into every transaction Richard Montgomery has ever made through this institution. You are going to compile a complete record of every suspicious activity, every shell company, every offshore transfer, and you are going to do it quietly, thoroughly, and without tipping off Montgomery or any of his associates. And if we refuse? Harrison's voice was barely a whisper. Gloria smiled the same warm, genuine smile she'd offered to Eleanor Blackwood for 31 years. Then I'll move my $3 billion to a bank that knows how to cooperate with its largest client. And I'll make sure the world knows exactly why. 3 days later, Richard Montgomery came looking for Gloria. He arrived at the penthouse unannounced, pushing past the doorman, demanding to see the cleaning lady who stole Eleanor's money. Security called up to warn Gloria, but she told them to let him come. She wanted him to come. Montgomery burst through the door like a storm, his face twisted with fury and something else, something desperate. "You think you can threaten me?" he snarled, stalking across the foyer. "You think because you've got Eleanor's money, you have any power? I've destroyed people worth more than you will ever be." Gloria was sitting in Eleanor's favorite chair by the window, Marcus standing protectively beside her. She didn't rise to meet Montgomery's attack. She simply watched him with an expression of profound calm. "Good morning, Richard," she said. "Would you like some tea?" "Don't you dare. Chamomile, I think." Eleanor always said chamomile was good for calming nerves. "And you seem unsettled." Montgomery's face went purple. "I know what you're doing. I know you've been asking questions at the bank. You think you can investigate me? You think you can find something to use against me?" "I think," Gloria said quietly, "that I already have." Montgomery froze. "I know about the Riverview fire, Richard. I know about Maria Santos and James Washington and little Deandra. I know about the payment you made to the arsonist, a man named Victor Delgado, who died in a car accident 3 months after the fire. Very convenient, that accident. Very neat." The color drained from Montgomery's face. "I know about the bribes to the fire inspector, the payoffs to the prosecutor's office, the shell companies you used to buy the building after it was condemned. I know everything, Richard." Eleanor documented it all. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Gloria reached beside her chair and lifted a thick folder. "Would you like to see the photographs? The bank records? The recorded conversation between you and Victor Delgado, where you specifically told him to make sure the basement catches first so the sprinkler system fails?" Montgomery's legs seemed to give out. He stumbled backward, catching himself on a table that probably cost more than his first car. That's not possible." Eleanor couldn't have. Eleanor was many things, Gloria said. But she was never stupid. And she spent the last 30 years of her life making sure that when the time came, the truth would come out. Montgomery's desperation was palpable now. His voice dropped to something between a plea and a threat. "What do you want? Money? I can give you money. More than Eleanor ever gave you. Name your price. You think this is about money? Everything is about money." Gloria stood slowly, rising to face the man who had laughed at her, dismissed her, and she now understood murdered innocent people for profit. She thought about all the families he'd displaced, all the lives he'd ruined, all the people who had suffered because Richard Montgomery III believed he was above consequences. And she thought about her own life, 31 years of being invisible, 31 years of being dismissed, 31 years of proving her worth to people who would never see it. "No, Richard," she said, "everything is about power. And for the first time in your miserable life, you're looking at someone who has more of it than you do." Montgomery's face twisted. "You think you've won? You think you can touch me? I have judges, senators, police commissioners in my pocket. I have lawyers who will bury you in paperwork for the next 20 years. You have nothing, Gloria interrupted. Because everything you built was built on secrets. And secrets, Richard, are only powerful when they stay secret. She took a step toward him. I'm going to give you one chance, one opportunity to make this right. You're going to turn yourself in. You're going to confess to the Riverview arson and the murders of Maria Santos, James Washington, and Deandra Washington. And you're going to cooperate fully with authorities in identifying everyone else involved in your network of corruption. You're insane. Maybe. Or maybe I'm the first person in your life who isn't afraid of you. Gloria's voice hardened. You have 48 hours to make your decision. After that, everything in Eleanor's journal goes public. Everything. The bribes, the fraud, the murders, all of it. And when that happens, every powerful friend you think you have is going to distance themselves from you faster than you can blink. Montgomery stared at her, and in his eyes, Gloria saw something she hadn't expected. Recognition. Because for the first time, Richard Montgomery III was looking at Gloria Jenkins and seeing not a cleaning lady, not a charity case, not a diversity statistic, but a genuine threat to everything he'd built. You have no idea what you're starting, he whispered. You're right, Gloria agreed. I don't, but I know how it ends. It ends with you paying for what you did to those people. It ends with the truth finally coming to light. And it ends with people like me, people you've spent your whole life looking down on, finally having the power to hold people like you accountable. She smiled. Now get out of my house. The next 2 days were the longest of Gloria's life. She didn't sleep. She barely ate. She spent every hour reviewing Eleanor's documents, preparing for whatever Montgomery might throw at her, and trying to anticipate his next move. Marcus was her constant companion, refusing to leave her side. He helped her organize the evidence, researched legal strategies online, and made sure she remembered to drink water. He was, Gloria realized, no longer her child, he was her partner. Mama, he said on the second night, what if he doesn't turn himself in? What if he tries to hurt us? Gloria looked at her son, this beautiful, brilliant young man she'd raised against all odds, and felt a surge of protective fury. Then we release everything. Every document, every photograph, every recording. We burn his world to the ground. And if he still comes after us, then we fight. The same way we've always fought together. The 48 hours passed. Montgomery didn't turn himself in. Instead, at exactly 9 a.m. on the third day, Gloria's phone rang. It was Harrison from the bank. Mrs. Jenkins, his voice was shaking. You need to come to First Atlantic immediately. Richard Montgomery is here. And he's brought the FBI. Chapter 11. The Betrayal. Gloria arrived at the bank to find chaos. The lobby was filled with federal agents, their navy blue jackets marking them as FBI. Police officers manned the doors, and in the center of it all, standing with a smirk on his face, was Richard Montgomery III. Ah, there she is, Montgomery announced as Gloria entered. The extortionist. Gloria's blood went cold. An agent approached her, a tall, stern-faced man who identified himself as Special Agent Thomas Burke. Mrs. Gloria Jenkins. Yes, you're under arrest for extortion, blackmail, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. The words washed over Gloria like a wave. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard fragments, fabricated evidence, scheme to defraud, conspiracy to commit extortion. Montgomery had turned the tables. Of course he had. Why would a man who had spent 30 years buying judges and prosecutors suddenly give up? Instead of surrendering, he'd gone on the offensive. He'd used his connections to spin a new narrative, one where Gloria was the villain, a scheming cleaning lady who had manipulated a senile old woman into changing her will, then used forged documents to extort a respected businessman. As the agents led Gloria away in handcuffs, she caught Montgomery's eye. He was smiling. I told you, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Gloria said nothing. But as she was escorted past him, she allowed herself a small smile of her own. Because what Richard Montgomery didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that Gloria had anticipated exactly this response. And the real game was only beginning. The handcuffs bit into Gloria's wrists as the agents led her toward the waiting vehicle. Behind her, she could hear Montgomery celebrating, his sycophants congratulating him on dealing with the threat. But Gloria's mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about a conversation she'd had with Eleanor years ago during one of their quiet afternoon teas. The truly powerful, Eleanor had said, never reveal their full hand until they're ready to win. They let their opponents think they're winning, right up until the moment they're not. Gloria had asked what she meant. Eleanor had smiled. I mean, Gloria, that sometimes the best defense looks exactly like surrender. Now, sitting in the back of an FBI vehicle, watching Manhattan's towers disappear behind her, Gloria finally understood what her old friend had meant. Richard Montgomery thought he'd won. He had no idea that his victory was exactly what Gloria had been counting on. 72 hours. That's how long Gloria Jenkins sat in a federal holding cell while Richard Montgomery's lawyers worked to ensure she'd spend the rest of her life in prison. 72 hours while her son Marcus waited outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters who had already convicted her in the court of public opinion. 72 hours while the man who had murdered 3 people in a fire he'd ordered celebrated his apparent victory in Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. But what Richard Montgomery didn't know, what no one knew, except Gloria and the one person she'd trusted with Eleanor's final secret, was that those 72 hours had been planned, every single minute of them. Because Eleanor Blackwood hadn't just left Gloria her money, she'd left her something far more valuable. She'd left her a trap, and Richard Montgomery had just walked right into it. The federal holding facility in Lower Manhattan was exactly what Gloria had expected: cold, gray, and designed to strip away every last shred of dignity from the people trapped inside it. She sat on the thin mattress in her cell, still wearing the navy Chanel suit that now felt like a costume from another life. The other women in the facility stared at her with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. News of her arrest had spread quickly, the cleaning lady who'd inherited billions and then tried to blackmail one of New York's most prominent businessmen. The narrative had already been written. Gloria Jenkins was a fraud, a con artist, a cautionary tale about what happens when people reach above their station. She'd heard the guards discussing it outside her cell. She'd seen the news coverage on the common room television talking heads, debating whether Eleanor Blackwood had been senile, whether Gloria had manipulated her, whether the whole inheritance should be contested and returned to legitimate recipients. Richard Montgomery had been busy. In 72 hours, he'd managed to poison every well. The FBI agents who'd arrested her were clearly working from his script. The charges against her: extortion, blackmail, fraud, had been filed with suspicious speed, as if the paperwork had been prepared in advance. Even her court-appointed attorney seemed convinced she was guilty. Everything was going exactly as Montgomery planned, which meant everything was going exactly as Gloria planned, too. On the morning of the third day, a guard appeared at her cell. "Jenkins, you've got a visitor." Gloria rose calmly. "Who is it?" The guard's expression was strange, somewhere between confusion and respect. "Lady from some law firm. Says she's your new attorney." Gloria smiled. "Show me the way." The woman waiting in the visitation room was not what Gloria expected. She was young, couldn't be older than 30, with dark skin, natural hair twisted into elegant braids, and eyes that burned with an intensity Gloria recognized. The intensity of someone who had spent their whole life fighting to be seen. "Mrs. Jenkins," the woman said, standing and extending her hand. "I'm Destiny Williams. I'll be representing you from this point forward." Gloria shook her hand. "Who sent you?" "Eleanor Blackwood." Gloria's heart skipped. "I'm sorry." Destiny pulled a chair close and sat down, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 18 months ago, Eleanor Blackwood contacted my firm, Taylor & Associates, and hired us to handle the legal aftermath of her estate. She paid us an extremely generous retainer and gave us specific instructions that were only to be activated in the event of your arrest. She knew this would happen. She didn't just know, she counted on it. Destiny opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Mrs. Jenkins. Eleanor Blackwood spent the last 5 years of her life working with a team of investigators, lawyers, and forensic accountants, all coordinated through our firm to build an airtight case against Richard Montgomery and his network. Gloria felt her breath catch. The journal she gave you was never meant to be the weapon, Destiny continued. It was the bait. Eleanor knew that if you confronted Montgomery with that evidence, he would respond by having you arrested on false charges. He would use his connections to corrupt the legal process. And in doing so, he would expose himself, Gloria finished. Destiny smiled. Exactly. Every move Montgomery has made in the last 72 hours, the fabricated charges, the bought FBI agents, the media campaign has been documented. Every communication, every payment, every string he's pulled, and all of it has been transmitted in real time to an independent investigative team that answers to no one Montgomery can buy. Gloria sat back in her chair, stunned. Eleanor set this up? Eleanor spent 30 years watching monsters like Richard Montgomery get away with their crimes because they could always buy their way out. She knew that the only way to truly bring them down wasn't to expose their past crimes, it was to catch them committing new ones in real time. Destiny leaned forward. Mrs. Jenkins, in approximately 4 hours, the Attorney General of New York is going to announce the indictment of Richard Montgomery III on charges including obstruction of justice, bribery of federal officials, witness tampering, and conspiracy to commit murder. He's going to be joined by 23 of Montgomery's associates, including 2 federal judges, a police commissioner, and the FBI agents who arrested you. And the original charges against me will be dropped within the hour. But more importantly, Destiny's eyes shone. The Attorney General is going to publicly acknowledge that you were instrumental in exposing one of the most extensive corruption networks in New York history. You're not going to be portrayed as a criminal, Mrs. Jenkins. You're going to be portrayed as a hero. Gloria closed her eyes. She thought about Eleanor, about all those afternoons spent together, all those conversations about justice and power, and the ways the wealthy escaped consequences that would destroy anyone else. She thought about the quiet determination in Eleanor's eyes whenever she spoke about the people who had used her, manipulated her, and treated her as nothing more than a bank account with legs. And she thought about the final conversation they'd had 2 weeks before Eleanor died. Gloria, I'm going to ask you to do something that might destroy your life. But if you succeed, if you're willing to walk through fire, you'll be able to do something I never could. You'll be able to make them pay. Gloria had agreed without hesitation. Now she understood why. What happens next? She asked Destiny. Destiny stood, gathering her briefcase. What happens next is that you walk out of this facility a free woman. What happens after that, she smiled, is entirely up to you. The steps of the federal courthouse had been transformed. Television crews from every major network lined the street. Reporters jostled for position. Photographers' cameras clicked and flashed like electronic lightning. And at the center of it all, waiting behind a podium emblazoned with the seal of the New York State Attorney General, was Gloria Jenkins. She had changed out of the Chanel suit that felt wrong now, like wearing a costume designed by someone else's expectations. Instead, she wore a simple black dress and the pearl earrings Marcus had bought her for Mother's Day 3 years ago, using money he'd earned from his part-time job at the library. Real. That's what she wanted to be. Not the billionaire the media had created. Not the criminal Montgomery had tried to frame. Just Gloria Jenkins, the woman she'd always been. Marcus stood beside her, tall and proud, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Behind them stood Destiny Williams and the rest of Eleanor's legal team. And in the crowd, Gloria spotted faces she recognized, other cleaning ladies she'd worked alongside for years, neighbors from Brownsville, students from Marcus's school, her people, the people she'd never stopped belonging to, no matter how many zeros appeared in her bank account. The Attorney General finished his statement, a detailed recounting of Montgomery's crimes, the corruption network he'd built, the lives he'd destroyed, and the role Gloria had played in bringing him to justice. He praised her courage, her dignity, and her willingness to risk everything to ensure that 3 people who died in a fire 15 years ago would finally receive justice. Then he stepped aside, and Gloria approached the microphone. The crowd fell silent. For a moment, Gloria simply stood there, looking out at the sea of faces, some hostile, some curious, some openly hopeful. She thought about all the times she'd stood in rooms full of people who'd looked right through her, who'd treated her like a piece of furniture, who'd never bothered to learn her name. Now the world was watching, and Gloria Jenkins finally had something to say. 3 days ago, she began, her voice steady, I was arrested on charges that Richard Montgomery and his lawyers invented to destroy me. They called me a fraud, an extortionist, a con artist. They said I manipulated a lonely old woman into giving me her money. She paused, letting the words settle. And do you know what? If I had been a different kind of person, if I had been the person they expected me to be, maybe that story would have been believable. After all, who could imagine a black cleaning lady being anything other than what they saw? Who could imagine someone like me inheriting billions because of friendship, loyalty, and genuine human connection? Gloria's voice grew stronger. The answer is Eleanor Blackwood. She saw me, not my uniform, not my skin color, not my address or my bank account or any of the other labels society uses to sort people into categories of worthy and unworthy. She saw me, Gloria, and she decided that a lifetime of being seen was worth more than any amount of money. Tears were streaming down faces in the crowd. Gloria felt her own eyes burning, but she pressed on. Richard Montgomery killed 3 people 15 years ago because their lives stood between him and a profit margin. He killed Maria Santos, who had raised 6 children in that building and was planning to finally visit her mother's grave in Puerto Rico. He killed James Washington, a veteran who spent every Sunday morning cooking breakfast for the elderly residents on his floor. And he killed Deandra Washington, a 9-year-old girl whose only crime was living in a building that a rich man wanted. Gloria's voice cracked, but she did not stop. For 15 years, those deaths were dismissed as an accident. For 15 years, Richard Montgomery attended charity galas and served on boards and gave speeches about giving back to the community. For 15 years, he got away with murder because the people he murdered were invisible, because their lives didn't matter to anyone with power. She looked directly into the cameras, but they mattered to Eleanor, and they matter to me. And today, finally, they matter to the law. Gloria gripped the podium, her knuckles whitening. I want to say something to everyone watching, especially to the people who look like me, who live like I lived, who have spent their whole lives being dismissed and overlooked and told that they don't belong in the spaces where power operates. You belong. You matter. Your dignity is not determined by your job title or your income or the neighborhood you come from. And the people who treat you as less than the people who look through you, laugh at you, dismiss you, those people are wrong. Not because you might turn out to be secretly rich, like some fairy tale, but because you are human, and that alone makes you worthy of respect. Gloria straightened. Eleanor Blackwood taught me that. She saw me when no one else did, and she spent the last years of her life making sure that when she was gone, I would have the power to do what she couldn't, hold the powerful accountable for their crimes. That's what I intend to do. Not just with Montgomery, but with all the others like him. The people who profit from poverty. The people who build empires on the backs of the invisible. The people who believe that wealth exempts them from consequences. Gloria looked out at the crowd. My name is Gloria Jenkins. For 31 years, I cleaned houses for people who never learned my name. Today, I'm worth almost $3 billion. And I'm going to spend every penny of it making sure that no one, no matter how poor, how marginalized, how invisible, is ever treated the way I was treated, the way Maria Santos was treated, the way Deandra Washington was treated. That's not a threat. It's a promise. She stepped back from the microphone. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the applause began, not polite, not perfunctory, but a wave of genuine, thunderous appreciation that swept through the crowd and seemed to shake the very foundations of the courthouse. Gloria felt Marcus's arm around her shoulders. She heard Destiny Williams cheering behind her. She saw tears on the faces of strangers who had never met her but who somehow understood exactly what this moment meant. And for the first time in 53 years, Gloria Jenkins did not feel invisible. 1 week later, Gloria sat in the visitors' room of the Metropolitan Detention Center. Richard Montgomery looked nothing like the man who had laughed at her in the bank lobby. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his frame. The arrogant posture had collapsed into something hollow and beaten. Even his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes that had dismissed her so easily, had gone dull. "Why did you want to see me?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Gloria took her time answering. She looked at the man across from her, really looked, and tried to see the human being behind the monster. It wasn't easy. "I want to understand something," she finally said. Deandra Washington was 9 years old. She liked unicorns and wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. Her father said she used to save earthworms from the sidewalk after it rained and put them back in the soil. Montgomery flinched. "How did you do it? How did you order someone to start a fire that you knew would kill people, including a child, and then go on living your life as if nothing happened?" For a long moment, Montgomery said nothing. Then, slowly, his mask cracked. "I didn't think about her," he said. "I didn't think about any of them. They were just numbers, obstacles, names on a spreadsheet that represented a problem I needed to solve. I never saw their faces. I never knew their stories. They were invisible to me." "Invisible?" "Yes." His voice broke. "The same way you were invisible to me in that bank. The same way everyone who isn't, who doesn't look like." He couldn't finish the sentence. Gloria waited. "I grew up being told I was special," Montgomery continued, his words tumbling out like a confession. "My family, my schools, my entire world reinforced the idea that people like me, wealthy, white, powerful, were somehow fundamentally different from everyone else. Better, more important, more real. And when you grow up believing that, it becomes easy to look at other people and see them as less. Not fully human. Not deserving of the same consideration you'd give to a family pet. Just things to be used, moved, discarded when they become inconvenient." He looked at Gloria with something approaching genuine remorse. "I'm not trying to excuse what I did. There is no excuse. I killed those people, and I'll spend the rest of my life paying for it. But you asked how I did it. And the answer is, I didn't see them as people. I was trained my whole life not to see them as people." Gloria absorbed his words. She thought about all the times she'd been invisible, all the wealthy families who had never learned her name, never asked about her life, never seen her as anything more than the hands that scrubbed their toilets. She thought about how close she'd come to accepting that invisibility as her reality, her destiny, her truth. And she thought about Eleanor, the lonely old woman who had looked past all the barriers society had constructed and had simply seen Gloria. "You could have been different," Gloria said finally. "You could have chosen to see people, to treat them as human beings. Nobody forced you to become what you became. I know. Do you? Because there are still people out there, just like you. People who inherited power and used it to crush anyone who stood in their way. People who never questioned the systems that elevated them and destroyed everyone else." Gloria leaned forward. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life fighting those systems, and fighting people like you. Not because I hate you, though I probably should, but because every person you hurt, every life you destroyed, every moment of dignity you stole from someone who deserved better, all of that represented a failure. A failure of humanity. A failure of our society to protect its most vulnerable members from its most powerful predators." She stood. "I hope you find some kind of peace, Richard. I honestly do. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to hatred would only hurt me. But I want you to know something." Gloria met his eyes. Deandra Washington loved unicorns. She wanted to be a veterinarian. She saved earthworms from drowning. And she deserved to grow up, to have a life, to become whoever she was meant to be. You took that from her. And no amount of regret, no prison sentence, no confession will ever give it back. But I'm going to make sure her story is told. I'm going to make sure people remember her name, and I'm going to spend every resource I have making sure that other children who live in buildings that wealthy developers want to tear down, children who are invisible to people like you, have a chance to grow up and live their dreams. That's Deandra's legacy now. And that's what you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. Gloria turned and walked toward the door. Gloria. Montgomery's voice stopped her. For what it's worth. I'm sorry. For laughing at you that day. For everything. Gloria paused without turning around. I know, she said. But your apology doesn't matter to me, Richard. It matters to the people you hurt. And most of them can't hear you anymore. She left without looking back. 6 months later, the Jenkins Foundation officially opened its doors. Located in the heart of the Bronx, on the exact plot of land where the Riverview Apartments had once stood, the foundation was unlike anything New York City had ever seen. It combined affordable housing, a community health center, free legal services, and educational programs under one roof, all designed to serve the people who had been failed by systems designed to protect the powerful. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew thousands. Community members, activists, politicians, celebrities, everyone wanted to be part of what the media was calling the most ambitious philanthropic initiative of the decade. But Gloria had insisted on one thing. The ceremony would be simple. No fancy catering, no champagne, no red carpets. Just the community coming together to celebrate something built for them by someone who understood what they needed. Gloria stood at the podium, Marcus beside her, and looked out at the crowd. She saw former cleaning ladies who had worked alongside her for decades. She saw young people from the neighborhood who had helped design the educational programs. She saw elderly residents who had been displaced by gentrification and were now guaranteed affordable housing for life. And she saw 3 large photographs mounted above the foundation's entrance: Maria Santos, James Washington, and Deandra Washington. The people this was all for. When I was a little girl in Savannah, Georgia, Gloria began, my grandmother used to tell me that the measure of a person isn't what they have, it's what they give. She cleaned houses her whole life, just like I did, and she never had 2 dimes to rub together. But she was the richest person I ever knew, because she gave everything she had to the people she loved. Gloria's voice caught, but she pressed on. I inherited almost $3 billion 6 months ago. Before that, I had maybe $2,000 in my bank account on a good month. And do you know what? The money hasn't changed who I am. It's just given me more tools to do what I've always wanted to do: help people. She gestured toward the building behind her. This foundation isn't mine. It belongs to the community. It's named after me. But it's built for you, for every person who's ever been invisible, overlooked, dismissed, or forgotten. For every child who's been told they can't succeed because of where they come from. For every family that's been displaced by wealthy developers who saw their neighborhood as nothing more than an investment opportunity. Gloria took a deep breath. Richard Montgomery tried to destroy this community 15 years ago. He almost succeeded. But today, we're taking it back. We're building something beautiful on the ashes of his cruelty. And we're proving that no matter how much power the wealthy and privileged have, they can never truly defeat people who refuse to give up. She looked at the photographs of Maria, James, and Deandra. These 3 people were killed because their lives were inconvenient to a man who saw them as obstacles instead of human beings. But their memory lives on. And as long as this foundation stands, as long as this community thrives, they will never be forgotten. Gloria raised her hand toward the ribbon. This is for Maria Santos, who raised 6 children in this neighborhood and never stopped believing in its potential. This is for James Washington, who served his country and then came home to serve his neighbors. And this is for Deandra Washington, who loved unicorns, wanted to be a veterinarian, and deserved to grow up and live her dreams. Gloria cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted. And as the cheers washed over her, as Marcus hugged her tight, as the community she devoted her life to surged forward to celebrate, Gloria Jenkins looked up at the sky and whispered words meant only for Eleanor. "We did it. We really did it." The bank was quiet at this hour. Gloria walked through the lobby of First Atlantic Private Bank. Her bank, now, since she'd become the majority shareholder after Montgomery's arrest, triggered a fire sale of his assets and marveled at how different everything felt. The marble floors were the same. The chandeliers still sparkled. The leather chairs still looked like they'd been stolen from a palace. But the atmosphere had changed completely. Gloria had implemented new policies as the bank's primary owner. Diversity initiatives that actually meant something. Community investment programs that prioritized low-income neighborhoods. Zero tolerance for the kind of corruption that had made Montgomery possible. She'd also hired Jerome, the security guard, who'd initially questioned her presence as head of customer relations. And she'd promoted Mei Lin Chen to chief operations officer. People who saw others clearly, Gloria had learned, made the best leaders. "Mrs. Jenkins?" Gloria turned to find Harrison approaching, a warm smile on his face. He'd changed too, still professional, still polished, but with a humanity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Watching Gloria dismantle the corrupt system that had protected Montgomery had shifted something in him. "Philip, how many times do I have to tell you to call me Gloria?" He chuckled. "Old habits. I have someone here to see you. A young woman from the foundation. She says it's important." Gloria followed Harrison to his office, where a teenager waited nervously. She couldn't have been older than 15, dark-skinned, natural hair in braids, wearing clothes that had clearly been mended multiple times. "Mrs. Jenkins?" The girl's voice trembled. "My name is Jasmine Washington. I'm Deandra's cousin." Gloria's heart seized. "My family, we saw everything you did. The foundation, the trial, the way you made sure everyone knew Deandra's name." Tears streamed down Jasmine's face. "I just wanted to thank you. And to tell you that because of the scholarship program you set up, I'm going to be the first person in my family to go to college." Gloria crossed the room and wrapped Jasmine in her arms. "What are you going to study?" Jasmine pulled back, smiling through her tears. "Veterinary medicine, like Deandra wanted to." Gloria couldn't speak. She just held the girl, this living, breathing symbol of everything she'd fought for, and let herself feel the weight of the moment. Hope. That's what Eleanor had given her, all those years ago. Hope that the invisible could become visible. Hope that justice could prevail over corruption. Hope that one person, armed with nothing but dignity and determination, could change the world. And now Gloria was passing that hope to the next generation. "You're going to do amazing things, Jasmine," Gloria finally managed. "Deandra would be so proud of you." Jasmine nodded, wiping her eyes. "Will you come to my graduation? 4 years from now? I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world." As Jasmine left, escorted by Harrison to arrange the details of her scholarship, Gloria walked to the window and looked out at Manhattan's skyline. So much had changed in the past year. So much had changed in her entire life. The cleaning lady who had been laughed at, dismissed, and almost destroyed was now one of the most powerful women in the country. But the strange thing was, Gloria didn't feel powerful. She felt grateful. Grateful for Eleanor, who had seen her when no one else did. Grateful for Marcus, who had stood beside her through everything. Grateful for the community that had embraced her foundation and made it their own. And grateful for the chance to prove to herself, to the world, to every person who had ever been invisible, that dignity was not something you earned through wealth or status. It was something you carried inside you, and no one could ever take it away. Gloria's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Mom, CNN wants to interview you about the foundation's expansion into Chicago. Also, MIT called. They want to give you an honorary doctorate, and Jasmine's family invited us to dinner. What do you want to do first?" Gloria smiled. "Dinner," she typed back. "Everything else can wait. The important things always come first." She put her phone away and headed for the door. Outside, the sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Gloria paused at the bank's entrance, the same door she'd walked through a year ago, terrified and uncertain, clutching her son's hand. She wasn't terrified anymore. She wasn't uncertain. She was Gloria Jenkins, and she had work to do. This story is dedicated to everyone who has ever been invisible, who has worked thanklessly, been dismissed casually, and been told that their dreams were too big for their circumstances. You are seen, you matter, and your time is coming.